Ladies and gentlemen, it's the episode you've been waiting for. Today on True Life, we're joined by Dr. Randall Hansen, a healing advocate, educator, and ethicist working at the frontier of trauma, wholeness, and transformation. His work challenges the modern fragmentation of healing and returns us to its original meaning, to make whole. Drawing from lived experience, ancient wisdom, and intentional psychedelic practice, Dr. Hansen confronts the gap between surviving and truly healing. This is a conversation about what it costs to stay broken and what becomes possible when we don't. And I should also mention the author of 4 incredible books. There's probably another 5th one being written right now. But Dr. Randall, thank you so much for being here today. How are you?
George, I always look forward to these conversations. You know, on some podcasts, I get nervous beforehand thinking, I better have all my notes in front of me. And with you, I love it because it's sort of not a free-for-all, but just a beautiful, open conversation that doesn't require much preparation, but just love and open heart. So I am excited to be here today.
Yeah, me too. I love our conversations. And I follow you on social media. And of course, you and I have multiple conversations, some online, some offline. But what an incredible time. And you are doing so much in healing, whether it's psychedelics or with dieting or just bringing so much knowledge to the forefront to help people, man. I'm so stoked for that. I just want to say thanks again.
Thank you. Well, and I want to just jump in here because I just think, we were talking about timing and there are no coincidences, whether it's God, the universe, whatever you want to call it, brings things, people together, events together. And as we were talking about doing the show, I realized we picked a date just a few days before Christmas, and it reminded me of this movie. And I know viewers under a certain age will not know it, and that's fine. But it's this movie called White Christmas, and it's this beautiful movie about these veterans from World War II who go on to start a song and dance group and do really well. And they go to Vermont to see this former general who bought an inn, and there's no snow, and he's basically on the brink of bankruptcy. And so the main character goes down to New York to a popular TV show and says, "Everybody, I'm asking for your support. We're doing a special show in Vermont for our general. I'd like to see all the people from our platoon, our company, come up there and visit. And we're just supporting him. He's an honorable man, and he doesn't know anything about this. This is a surprise just to give him a boost." And I thought, wow, here I am. Who is my go-to when I said, who do I want to talk to about this veterans fundraising we're doing? And I said, George Monty, of course, popular podcaster. And so it's like this, I'm reliving this movie in my brain. But that's my plea. I mean, my plea is everyone out there listening, watching, share this podcast, share the fundraising page, contribute if you can. If you know anyone that's, I'll do the Kevin Bacon routine. If you know anyone that's connected to Tom Hanks or Gary Sinise or Mark Wahlberg or Carrie Underwood, all these celebrities that support veterans, please reach out to them. Again, we're trying to raise $35,000, and for some people that's everything, and for other people it's nothing. And so we're just asking the people to contribute in whatever way they can, even just sharing it to I don't think it'll ever go viral, but just to get the information out there.
Yeah. My dad was a Vietnam veteran. He was in recon, and my grandfather before him was a Marine. My whole family were Marines. And, my dad has shared some of his stories from time to time, not much, but a little bit. And, I'm 50 years old. I don't know anybody that hasn't been touched by the life of a Vietnam veteran, and I'm so grateful to all their service. And if you are listening to this, there's a QR code right on the screen right here. Think about it. Think about the lives and the sacrifice that veterans make, and particularly in this case, like the Vietnam veterans. Randall, I don't think anybody hasn't been touched by the life of a Vietnam veteran. What are your thoughts?
I agree. And my why for doing this is, number one, I've always been a supporter of veterans because they sacrifice themselves, their families, everything for protecting this country. And the Vietnam veterans have a special place in my heart for a lot of different reasons. I was growing up during that time. My oldest brother got his draft card, and the war ended before he was called, but that led to so many discussions in our household about what's honorable, what's not, what are the options. Do you go to Canada? What do you do? And then I'm such a supporter of the unseen, unheard. And I think the biggest crime that these Vietnam vets have suffered is coming home and being treated like war criminals sometimes, spat upon, not understood, and even the VA kind of turned them away. And so they've been told to be silent, to suck it up. And, we didn't even know about post-traumatic stress back in those days. And so my why is I want to lift these people up. And any of these Vietnam vets that are listening, I also encourage you to go to Heroic Hearts Project and apply for a healing retreat, because that's totally separate from this fundraising. We're trying to do fundraising for a specific Vietnam veteran retreat, but any veteran can apply for healing through Heroic Hearts Project.
Yeah. It's so interesting because earlier in the week, I was down at the dollar store and I was just going about my business. I was buying some wrapping paper or something, and I walked up to the counter, and there was a gentleman behind there, older gentleman. His name was Walter. Walter, if you're listening, man, I love you. Thank you for the conversation. And I go, Walter, how's it going, man? And he just looked at me and he goes, it's better than it was 60 years ago. And I had no idea. Like,
Wow.
it was just a random thing. And I'm like, what happened 60 years ago? He's like, I was one of the first people to be in Vietnam. And what ensued after that was like this long conversation. Imagine two guys at a dollar store, and this conversation is just happening. And like, it's just interesting. And he was just telling me, we got pretty deep. And by the end of the conversation, both of our eyes are tearing up. And he had dropped some real bombs on me. Like, he goes, I come back, and I'm thinking about, I killed some people there, not because I wanted to, because it was either that guy was going to kill me or I was going to kill him. And he goes, I still think about that guy. I still think about all these people. Like, what the fuck am I supposed to do with that? What am I supposed to do with that? And so, it's mind blowing to see how much weight this still holds in so many people, and how that affects our system, and how many people could benefit from something like the Heroic Hearts Project or a retreat or something from that example.
Yeah, I teared up when I read that story that you posted in the comments, and I also so loved it because I have a friend who says, "Don't ever ask me how am I," because no one wants to hear the answer. And you did that, and he was ready to give you an answer, which was beautiful, beautiful. Here's a shocking statistic that I don't know if you know about. This is from the Army website. So we know that most Vietnam veterans are probably in the ages between the late 60s and late 70s, depending if they kind of lied and got in early or were one of the later stage veterans. But on the U.S. Army website, it says 500 Vietnam vets are dying every day, typically in long-term or hospice-type care facilities. So we are losing these heroes every day. And that's not even talking about veteran suicide. And we know veterans over age 50, tend to have a higher suicide rate. So this is why I just feel it's so imperative. I mean, psychedelics are so powerful for healing, but now we're also looking at end of life, and what a blessing it could be, not only to heal and have this amazing transformation, but also to have this brighter outlook on knowing, that death is on the horizon. And so it's just, we have to do it. It's just an imperative. We have to do something. Estimates range that out of I think there were 2.7 million that served, men and women that served in Vietnam, and some estimates put it that about a million are still living today. Some say it's closer to 600,000. So again, I just see those numbers and say, man, we need to get on the stick. We need to get this done. We need to get this healing momentum moving forward.
Without a doubt. Juliet C says, this is for you, Bruce. Shout out to Bruce. Juliet, thank you so much for being here today. She also says that I've heard the same stories from some of the same veterans. Jesse, shout out to Jesse Monreal. Thanks for being here, Jesse. She says, after losing 2 immediate family members to suicide, one who was a Vietnam veteran who had the most beautiful spirit of anyone I have ever known, I hope and pray every single day that this nation and its lawmakers can finally do right by the people who have given so much and often then came home to get nothing back in return. Not even bare minimum care. Thank you for this conversation, George and Randall. The government isn't going to rally behind them, so we must do it ourselves and these nonprofits. Shout out to Jesse out there. It's so true.
Yeah. The government, I think the VA is slowly moving toward things like plant medicines, experimenting, right. Very small, but for some, for 60 years, the VA has done so little, but just push pills and move on to the next person. And we do need these nonprofits to, unfortunately, and that's why we need to support them. And so these veterans can get the healing they need and deserve.
What's it look like, Randall? Like, let's say someone reaches out to Heroic Hearts Project. What does it look like? Can you walk us through what it looks like from call to ceremony?
Yeah. So they by the way, Jenny would have loved to have been here, but she's off doing things today. And so it's just, you're stuck with me only, but
I love it. Shout out to Jenny.
So they go to the Heroic Hearts website and they click apply and they fill out an application which asks for their a narrative about their military history. You have to submit their proof of their military history, and then it goes into a system where it's analyzed by various experts on the staff, and then if they are approved, they go into the next pile, which is I think about every quarter or so, they do a call for the next several retreats. So then every veteran who's been approved, who sent an application, been approved, gets this call to action. Hey, in April, May, June, there are 5 retreats, and choose the one you want to do the most, rank them in order. And right now, they're typically mostly still international retreats where the medicine is legal. So they do it mostly in Peru. There's also retreats in Mexico. And they've started doing domestic, those are ayahuasca. And then domestically, they've started in Oregon with psilocybin retreats, and possibly also expanding to Colorado, now that Colorado has now kind of gotten more of their act together on how to do these things, also legal there. So psilocybin legal in both those states. And then they go through a couple of last minute checks, make sure their medical especially for ayahuasca, make sure their medical is all set so they can go to the jungle and have the more powerful medicine. Psilocybin, as you know, is more gentle and doesn't require as many medical hoops to jump through. Once they're approved and on that retreat, they start coaching sessions, and they have several weeks of coaching and community with the other participants that are going to be joining them in that retreat. Then they go to the retreat, have that experience. It varies by which one, usually at least 2 nights of ceremonies followed by some integration. And then they have several weeks of coaching integration afterwards. And that's basically the nutshell. And veterans have to, there's a sort of a sliding scale. If a veteran has complete need, no resources, then oftentimes there are donors that will pick up the complete tab. Otherwise, there's a small fee that Heroic Hearts asks so that the veterans have a little skin in the game. But the donations pick up the rest of those costs. So, for example, the one we're hoping to do would be a psilocybin retreat, and it cost about $35,000 to do just one of these retreats. And so we're trying to raise some money so these veterans don't have to pay anything at all to come to this retreat. If we raise 70,000, we can do two. If we raise, let's just keep pushing that multiplier up. But that's basically the process. There are a couple little details here and there that Jenny probably could have filled in more, and she might be cringing when she watches this, but I think I covered the process pretty well. There's also, there are several times where people from HHP talk to the veteran to make sure so they get a sense of who the organization is, and the organization gets a better sense of who the veteran is.
Yeah, it's well said. Shout out to our listeners on X. How amazing is it that the conversation around psychedelics is changing? This isn't the Woodstock 60s anymore. A new time deserves a new discussion. Thanks, Awake Coach from X. Keith comes in and Keith says, kind, compassion. Shout out to Keith Fiverson. Thanks for being here. He says, kind, compassionate individuals focused on helping individuals on their journey to align body, mind, and spirit to recover from PTSD. I got a question coming in here from James H., former infantry, Des Moines, Iowa. He says, when a country sends young men to absorb terror on its behalf, what ethical obligation does it carry once those men come home carrying the war inside them? What are your thoughts, Randall? Dr. Randall?
Wow. That is the age-old question. And I think I wish we could learn the lesson. I just watched recently rewatched the Ken Burns documentary on the Vietnam War, which if you haven't watched that, people, it speaks to this issue of this question. After every war, the government say, we've learned, this is why we never want to do this again, because it's horrible, it's horrific. And then we do it again. And I think with the Vietnam War especially, and everything past that, the Vietnam War, all of a sudden we had these coffins, we had this gruesomeness in our living rooms, on our TVs, and it was an awakening for the public as well. Unfortunately, that turned to anti-war, anti-soldier, which was unfortunate, and that happened that way. But I think we need to, I wish there was an uprising to put the pressure on all our lawmakers to say, let's put more thought into before we put any person in harm's way, because our history is we throw them in harm's way and then we do nothing on the back end. We put all these resources into training them on the front end, and then when they come back, it's like, well, good luck. The VA's there if you need something, but we're on to training the next person that may get injured, maimed, killed. And I think I would love to see us all rise up and say, we're all brothers and sisters here. Why can't we find a better way to resolve our conflicts, especially in places where, this might be controversial, but I'm going to say it anyway, where I don't think we have any business being. We really didn't have any business being in Vietnam. It was a civil war. We were so afraid of communists taking over the world, and we had to be the dominant superpower that we involved ourselves, and we've done that ever since with Afghanistan, Iraq, and it's just frustrating that we're repeating these things over and over again, and so many people and families and children and brothers and parents are paying the consequence.
Yeah, I remember hearing Jesse Ventura one time say, wouldn't it be nice if we could pass a law that says for every lawmaker who votes for a war, they have to send either themselves or someone in their immediate family to the front line? Like, how much less war would there be if everybody had to have skin in the game in that aspect of it? So
yeah,
that's awesome.
That.
Yeah. Thanks, James, for that question. Maria comes in from Oakland. Shout out to Maria. Shout out to Oakland. I'm right by you guys over there.
Yeah.
She says, why do we continue to treat trauma as pathology instead of as information, a signal that something meaningful was violated? Any thoughts on that?
Again, I take the lead from Jenny, who says that we are not a diagnosis, we are not a
Right.
label, and so yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, I think a lot of people can put trauma as a label, and I think I totally agree. I think it's more of a flashing light, a warning sign, or something that says, "Hey, look at me." There's something, yeah, some negative, horrible, whatever thing happened to me, and I need to be seen. I need to be dealt with, and I think that's the biggest
Yeah.
biggest problem we have with trauma is that we either stick it on as a label. Hey, I'm traumatized, so that's my excuse for whatever I'm doing, or it's so pushed back. I'm not traumatized. Don't look behind me. Don't look at that screaming light saying I'm traumatized because that was me.
Yeah.
I was a workaholic and I wore that badge of workaholism as an honor. Don't look behind this paper mask because you'll see the gruesomeness, the blackness of my soul behind it. And until I hit that healing journey and saw that, it was enlightening. So I agree. We have to see it as this is something that our body, our brains is screaming out for us to address. And we can turn it into something beautiful. I always come back to you, George, and I think about, the many traumas you've been through. And I still remember the first time we talked, or one of the early times, and you said, this was a gift. And I thought about some of my traumas, and I thought, at first, I was like, blank you. I mean, for you, yes, I'd love it. For me, they weren't a gift for
I
me.
know.
But then you start thinking about it, and you're like, that's why I love that question. What about your life would you change if you could go back in time? And that's where it starts thinking about what you said, because my answer was I never want to go back because I like the person I am where I am right now. If I change one thing, God knows what I would be today. And so that started making me think about that. And it's like, well, okay, if you can see these traumatic wounds as an opportunity for growth, for understanding, for evolving, then I don't know. I'm still, maybe a gift is still too strong a word, but I see that now. I see
Yeah.
that some of the things that happened to me just push that compassion level in me so high that I never would have without that trauma, without those wounds, and also understanding. For me, it was something done to me, and so understanding that,
Yeah.
man, what happened to that person? How was he traumatized that he did this to me? And so it becomes this. Yeah, I think it becomes maybe a gift of understanding ourselves better and our place in the world. I don't know. But thank you that will always be one of the moments in my memory forever when you said that, because it blew my mind. So thank you for that.
Yeah. Well, I think it was my dad, a Vietnam veteran, who I learned that from, coming back from Vietnam with so many scars and the really difficult inability to reintegrate into a society that no longer cared about him or thought about him.
Mm.
But because of that, because of what he did over there, because of the things that happened to him, he incorporated all of these incredible sort of character, you
Mm.
know, sort of these character gifts. Like, he was one of the most charismatic, and still is one of those charismatic people in the world. And he would tell different stories and just so magnetic in so many ways. And I remember thinking, hearing stories from my mom, like he was not the same when he came back. And for me, it was like, wow, even though he made it through that tragedy, like, what a gift. And he's still here and he's more charismatic now. And I think sometimes he would overcompensate, because of
Mm.
the pain. And I'm like, that maybe he wouldn't be the way he is unless he had those traumatic experiences. And so it was really my dad that helped me get to see tragedy as a gift, you know, and it's because of the tragedy that he went through, and he was able to metabolize it and spin it into this alchemy of a gift. But yeah, it's I think that's the only way to do it, Randall, is that once you move through that pain, you realize how changed you are and that you came through that pain. And if you can see that as the gift, like, you're pretty much unstoppable. Like these Vietnam veterans that came back, if they can do that, they could do anything. And it's just recovering that idea of like, yeah, like, look at what you made it to. Like, you guys are the leaders. Even though people said you were broken or you may feel broken, look what you've accomplished, and you came back and you found a way to raise a family. You found a way to make it through when no one else helped you. Like, these people are incredible. And so if you're listening to our voice today, you can go down to Heroic Hearts Project and you can give back to the people that have given us so much out there. Let me bring it back over to Juliet over here. Julia says the dichotomy is so real in life. She also says that, great way to put it, Dr. Randall Hansen, existential therapy in real time out there. Now, Dr. Randall, I have noticed an Ariadne thread that runs through many of your books, and it's that you have spoken to lots of different veterans out there. Have you noticed something in the stories of these veterans in all your books that kind of tie everything together?
That's a great question. I think that, to me, what the thing that ties it all together is just reinforcing this lack of support when they come home. You know, whatever the age of the veteran, most of the veterans I've spoken to for the books are from more the Afghanistan, Iraq wars. But it's just a running theme that they come home, and some think, you know, I'm just going to return right back to the job I had before. And they go back and they last a couple months, and their coworkers are looking at them differently, and they feel differently, and the job doesn't hold value anymore. And they start self-medicating, and then there's just this sort of downward cycle. Sometimes self-medicating sometimes is alcohol or drugs. Sometimes it's food. For a lot, it's porn or gambling, all these different things. And it's just a way to replace and try to, that wound is so deep, they're just trying to fill it with something. And so it's this, it comes back to me, the big thing is community. You know, these vets finding other vets, whether it's through, you know, local, not Rotary, Veterans of Foreign Wars, you know, one of those, or whether it's through Heroic Hearts or one of these other nonprofits, just finding that community and that sort of that way back. But again, none of that is supported by the government. It's all grassroots or nonprofits or having to do it on their own. But I think they come back, but they also have hope. At least the ones I've talked to for the book, they have hopes of finding themselves or finding the new version of themselves, and integrating that past. And I think the one really fascinating thing that I found with Heroic Hearts Project veterans is they often go into the retreat saying, you know, with the intention, I need to heal my moral injury, or I need to heal this PTS, or whatever that intention is about the war experience. And the first night, it's all about their childhood trauma that they had totally forgotten or pushed away. And so that's the other, I guess, circular pattern that comes around here, is that, which is back to my personal belief, that almost all of us could benefit from some kind of healing. I think plant medicines cut to the root pretty clearly and give us a kind of a hit on the head. This is what you need to be focusing on. And I love that, because there's so much truth in that, and it sheds away our blockers that we're trying. I don't want to face that. No, you do need to face that, because you're not going to be able to live your life until you do face that. And so I guess that's the final piece, is just that, you know, we all, you know, need healing. And if you just look at your life and say, what am I abusing something, whether it's food or people, or drugs. And if you are, then there's probably a reason that you're doing that. And it's probably connected to an old wound that you may or may not even remember, depending on when it happened.
Yeah, it's so well said. I when I think about the different plant medicines and my experience with them and the accounts of the people with whom I've spoken, it's sort of this lifting of shame and guilt. And
Yeah.
when I think about the conversation earlier that I spoke to you about Walter, I could see the shame and guilt not only in his words and his language, but the tears forming in his eyes. Like, I did not want to be someone who's thought of as a murderer. I don't want to kill anybody. And like, if you don't have the tools to see that particular situation without shame or guilt, there's no way to get around it. And plant medicines, in my own experience, have allowed me to approach situations with, my son dying or my wife getting cancer and just alleviate for a moment the idea of shame, guilt, and fault. And when you can do that, you can see clearly. It's like I can see clearly now the rain is gone. Like, and when you can see it clearly and you realize the circumstances that you were under didn't allow for any other way out, all
Yeah.
of a sudden there's room to breathe. Like, okay, there's something here. And it seems
Yeah.
to me that's something that also happens with a lot of the veterans' testimonies that come back. It's like they allow space to forgive themselves for a situation in which they did the best they could.
Yeah. Yeah. I love how you put that. I have a neighbor down the road who was a cop and shot in line of duty, left to die. And he is afraid of, he's done microdosing and it's dramatically changed him, but
Yeah.
he's afraid of doing the macrodose because I think he has some shame that he didn't pull his
Yeah.
weapon fast enough and the guy got the jump on him. And he's also afraid of reliving this
Yeah.
kind of near death experience. And I try to explain to him, just as you explained, that it's, and all these veterans share that same story. It's just, I love how you said that, removing that shame, removing any guilt that I didn't act fast enough to save my
Yeah.
brothers or sisters in
Yep.
combat. And it's also seeing it from a different perspective. It's not reliving it, and so you're not re-traumatizing yourself if you're got the right coaching and you have all this, have this knowledge beforehand. And it's more, yeah, it's just understanding it differently in a way we maybe could through a therapist or other work, but the psychedelics again just
Yep.
put you right there and
Yeah.
say, let's talk about this, let's deal with this. And then you come out with this different perspective, and it is a window to, this is what life could be. And I don't need to live with that shame and guilt or fear or anger, at least not at that level that I was doing, where every sound was making me jump from my chair or
Yeah.
scream or whatever it might be.
Yeah. It's so true. Juliet, thanks again for being here. She says,
Yeah.
Juliet C in the house. She says, genuine community matters.
Yeah.
Feeling understood and accepted, as well as appreciated and valued. Jesse Monroe. Shout out to Jesse. I think she might have a new book coming out, ladies and gentlemen. So if you're
Yeah.
watching this, click on Jesse and see what she's up to over there. She says the medical model completely ignores the need for people with trauma to be able to rewrite their personal narrative, engaging in meaning making and reorient themselves post trauma. This is post-traumatic growth. I love that. This is
Mhm.
trauma alchemy. The
Mhm.
medical model says you are sick, take pills, and it falls and people die. So well said. Post-traumatic
Yes.
growth. Let's make that
Ooh,
viral. I
I
love it.
love that. Yes. And it's so
Uh,
true,
it
and
is. Yes.
I also fear that a little bit with, I thought she was going to talk about that with psychedelics, and I was going to say that's a whole another discussion we can talk about. But I think that the conventional medical model is horrible, a pill for every ill. And that's the other thing, talking to some of these veterans from my books is, here are these 30-year-old people on
Yep.
7, 9 medications. That's polypharmacy. That's, in my mind, unethical. And
Yeah.
typically you only see that in people in their 90s, when
Yep.
they have so many different conditions going on. And that definitely ignores what's the root. And so I love, we need community. Back to what the other comment, Jesse's comment was too, that community. I ran a psychedelic group here in Spokane for a couple of years, and the best meetings were not ones where we had a speaker, but where we had community shares, and it was so powerful. And everyone left uplifted by just some of the transformations people were making, growth they were making through integration and this plant medicine work.
Yeah, I'm so like on the topic of community, I want to challenge everybody out there to, don't be afraid to just ask somebody how they're doing. Or I'll give you a good example. This happened at a local store of mine. I was wearing my Heroic Hearts t-shirt to the grocery store, and I'm picking out some salad, and a gentleman comes up to me and he taps me on the back, and I look back and he's just staring at me. And I said, "Hey, how's it going, man? How you doing?" And he just kept staring at me, and I was a little confused, and he's like, "I noticed your shirt." And I had to look down to see what shirt I was wearing. And I go, "Oh yeah, Heroic Hearts. They're a great outfit. They're really helping a lot of people. What interests you?" And I was wearing the green camel one that says, and on the back, there's like a call to action.
Yep.
And I go, "Well, what interests you about this shirt?" And he says, "I'm a veteran and I have PTSD." And it hit me. Here I am at a grocery store on a random Tuesday afternoon. And because I'm wearing this shirt, because I'm willing to have a conversation about psychedelics and helping veterans, or just psychedelics in general, people come up to you and are like, "Hey, what is this about? How can I get involved? Is there a number I can call?" And it's just so amazing how easy it is to start a conversation if you have a little bit of courage and are willing to help. And I think all of us want that out there. So,
yeah,
I highly recommend. Go ahead.
Yeah, I can say whoever designed that shirt at Heroic Hearts is brilliant, because I've had the same experience. Yeah. I have a shirt that says "Ask me about ayahuasca."
Yeah.
And same thing happened. I was at a restaurant and this waiter's kind of hanging behind my shoulder, and I'm like, "I'm fine, everything's okay. No problem with the meal." And he's just hanging there. And finally, as the meal was over, he comes up, sneaks behind my ear, and he says, "Can I ask you?" And the same thing, I kind of forgotten. I'm like, "Ask me what? How was the meal?" He's like, "No, can I ask you about ayahuasca?" And it was great. So I don't know who did it, but it's brilliant. I love that call to action, that question, because I have got, and then other people, maybe not quite yet brave enough to ask, but looking at the shirt and thinking about it. And so I love that you had that same experience. It's great.
Yeah, it stokes me to see, and it's weird because the same way he whispers to you, "I want to talk about ayahuasca." The guy, when I was speaking to this gentleman, he's like, "I'm kind of afraid to do it." There is this huge stigma around it still, even though there's so many great people out there working on the forefront at the VA, some people like Heroic Hearts, yourself and Jenny, and so many of these different, Diego Ugalde is another one. There's all these people out there that are really helping. It's still so taboo, Dr. Randall. Why do you think that is? Is that society? Is that culture? What is that?
Well, it's so funny. I was invited to a podcast a couple of weeks ago, and in the pre-interview, the host said, "By the way, I know some of your books about psychedelics, and we're not talking about psychedelics." And I was like, "Okay." I said, "I generally only talk about psychedelics and plant medicines when the host asks me, or depending on the podcast." But it's so funny. So, and I do get that. I get that from neighbors too, that there is, it's tied right back to this topic of Vietnam, because it was during that same era that all of a sudden, these psychedelics that are opening up these ideas of love and peace, and we can't have that because there's this war on and we need to win it. And so psychedelics were, immediately put on the stigma list, and been that way ever since. And I don't understand it because we've done it, so we know the benefits.
Right.
Even from an intellectual point, I don't understand it, because yes, I mean, we all heard "just say no" and all these things, and the egg in the frying pan, which weren't about psychedelics anyway, but it's that whole stigma of just say no to drugs. But even when you try to talk to them, psychedelics actually have addictive,
Right.
capabilities. And so they're not addictive, and they actually help people with addiction. And so I don't know whether it's just still that older generation that grew up with the dare and all that are still just stuck on that message. But I think anyone that I try to challenge, say, just look at it, just look at the research, or look at even just the indigenous use of these for centuries and centuries, and just open your mind. And I think that's the big egg we need to crack, is not more research. I mean, I love all the universities doing research, but it's like, oh my God, how much research do we need? And same with the VA, and even my state in Washington.
Yeah.
We had a law 2 years ago that was going to make plant medicines legal, like in Oregon and Colorado, and they turned the bill into another research bill. No, we're not. Let's do some more research. I'm like, oh, there are hundreds of universities doing this research. We need action. And so again, it comes back to these nonprofits that are saying, hey, we don't need more research. We need the actual boots on the ground doing the work and trying to help these people find the healing. And so that's kind of where I am with this subject, I guess.
Yeah, I can understand an abundance of caution, but this works. I've talked to people. I've done it. I know people in my life that I love that have gotten better. It works, and I understand the need for caution. I get it, but
Yes.
I'm so grateful for people like Heroic Hearts, or yourself and Jenny, Diego Ugalde, I mentioned before, Jesse Manuel. Everybody out there is really trying to find a way to apply something that's worked for eons. People have been using this for a long time.
Yeah.
We got Clint Kyles chiming in over here. The great
Yay!
Clint Kyles, psychedelic Christian podcast. Check him out there. He says we rightly focus on the physical and mental aspects of trauma, but how much of the trauma our vets carry is spiritual in nature, and how little support and direction is offered or provided. I recognize that our religious communities appear to be ill-equipped to help those with post and trauma. This is a great point, Clint. What are your thoughts on that, Randall?
Wow, that's a beautiful point. And again, that's why plant medicines are so powerful for that. But I saw, again, and not to harp on this Ken Burns documentary, but I saw some of that in some of the conversations people had about losing their faith over what they witnessed over there.
Yeah.
And yeah, you come back in the VA court, church and states, of course, they're not going to help with anything spiritual. And I agree. I think probably most of religious groups weren't ready to handle it. But back to plant medicines, to me, like, I did a lot of my healing in nature. And so psychedelics for me were sort of the taking me to the penthouse or taking me to the top level.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I desperately needed that I didn't get was the spiritual aspect. And George, I know you and I have talked about this, but probably as a kid, I had some amazing spiritual moments at the altar. I was an altar boy, and I just felt God's presence there sometimes, and I lost it through this abuse. And during an ayahuasca ceremony, rainy, cloudy middle of the night, and I walked outside, and it was like the heavens were just lit up. And my interpretation of that was, we're with you, whoever the spirit, soul, God, whatever you want to call that. And to me, that is one of the most powerful aspects of plant medicines, is that I've talked to people that were atheists before plant medicines, and afterwards they're not ready to say God and I believe in Jesus or whatever, but they come back saying, okay, there's something out there. There is a power, and I'm going to explore that. And that's what we're talking about. Now, we're not talking about religion. We're talking about spiritual healing.
Yeah.
And I think that is a profound aspect of plant medicine work, not just the trauma healing, but the spiritual healing as well. And sometimes the spiritual and the trauma healing are one and the same.
Yeah, there is no denying that a plant medicine ceremony at a significant amount will show you that you're not alone. Like you are part of something bigger than you can possibly imagine. And that to me is a space in which healing takes place. Like we get
Yeah.
so caught up in like it's my fault, I'm guilty, I should be ashamed of this. And you have such like this narrow tunnel vision of what's happening in reality. And a psychedelic experience or a plant medicine experience under the right watchful care or in the right set and setting, however you want to deem it, will show you that you are not alone. There is something bigger that's all around you, that's constantly pouring into you, that is inspiring you, that is communicating to you. And when you can make that connection,
Yeah.
everything seems to brighten up a little bit. You know, you're not alone out there. And so many people, they feel like they're alone. And that's what leads to so much of these traumatic experiences is there. I have Andre M, retired Marine coming from New Orleans, Louisiana. He says, why do we celebrate veterans symbolically, but refuse to fund the actual work of healing them? Thank you, Andre, for your service.
Indeed. That was a fantastic question. Yeah. Again, it comes back to the earlier discussion that we're so short-sighted. You know, we're willing to put the money into everything, all the preparation beforehand, but not willing to do anything afterwards. And it's just it's so strange to me because we spend all this time training people to be in brotherhood, get out there, and brotherhood saves lives all the time out in the battlefield. And then when they come back, their brotherhood is gone because there's no official way, there's no not decommissioning, but in the sense of that decompressing, and they're just sent home. And you know, like your dad, especially back in those days, even more so than at least today, maybe there's a little more trying to foster community or some healing. But back then, especially with your dad's generation, it was more just good luck. And I don't know why we don't. You know, so many politicians have the little American flag on there, or I support veterans. Well, tell me how you support veterans. How do you do it? Because I have seen so much focus on military spending, on planes and bombs and weapons and all these things, and so little on aftercare and support of veterans. It is truly so much lip service. And that's why so many of these veterans say, don't thank me for my service, because that's just bullshit. Do something. Don't thank me. Yeah. I've been thanked too often and gotten nothing. You know, it's just a pat in the back. And then, next year I'll thank you again on Veterans Day. It's like, no, we need more. We need more action. And again, it comes back, sadly, to these nonprofits. And so again, I would just encourage, and if you work for a big corporation, I'd say, hey, bring this up the ladder to the corporate chain and say, what are we doing for veterans? There are so many companies that hire veterans, and I love that. Thank you.
Yeah.
But maybe also contribute to their healing on top of just hiring them would be another thing that we could do.
Yeah, I think another aspect of it is if we and my dad has had some really awesome things to say about the VA as of recently. Good. Like they have really helped him through different modalities. And I think I think it's the pressure that the veterans themselves have put on the VA, and the families of the veterans have said, hey, we need to do some more things. So I know that there's great people out there in that aspect of it. But I think that there's a fundamental conflict of interest when the VA is getting their money from the government and the government is making tons of money off of wars. You don't want to come back and publicly say, look at all these ruined people, because that fundamentally undercuts everything you're doing to try to promote the war. And if you look at the ways in which we go to war, whether it was Iraq or even Iran now, it turns into this patriotic fervor of like, you got to go support democracy over here. Well, I can tell you from my dad, we're not making democracy in any other place. Like we're over there doing things for special interests. And those special interests don't include the special interests of the people fighting, you know? And so I think that there's a real conflict of interest of wanting to publicize the broken people that come back, because it undercuts the very strategy of getting people to sign up and go do it. So, you know, I don't know how to solve that. And I'm glad that there's these nonprofits out there that are taking care of people. But any thoughts on that, Randall? Dr. Randall?
I was just going to say, so it's sad. We've been warned of the military industrial complex for decades, and yet no one has done anything to try to dismantle it. And so, yeah, there's this whole industry. Who was it? When I think it was Zelensky from Ukraine was in Washington trying to gain support in Congress for more aid. There was this picture, and he was not surrounded by Congress people. He was surrounded by military contractors. So, these presidents of these companies who are going to get all the benefit of getting more aid to Ukraine because they're going to buy their weapons. And I thought, wow, that's not a picture to wake people up that our military industrial complex is running part of this show. And there is a huge benefit for war for these companies and many of these politicians who have a vested interest either from campaign contributions or maybe even investments in those companies. So it's something that I wish we could break up that complex as well in some way.
Yeah, I don't I don't pretend to understand the whole idea of the geopolitical strategies of the world, but it seems to me a lot of these wars are just giant laundering machines for NGOs, family offices, corrupt policies. And it's, what about our veterans? What about the people in our country? Like, why are we spending billions of dollars in foreign wars when we can't even build our own infrastructure over here? When our veterans are coming back damaged, and we're writing blank checks to other countries to go invade other things. It's so ridiculous. It makes me so upset, especially seeing people in my family that have had ruined marriages, that didn't get to be the best versions of themselves because they were sold this propaganda. And it just drives me crazy. It drives me crazy.
Yeah, I agree. We know some veterans that are disabled and they have to, constantly fight the VA for higher benefits or increased benefits. And it's so disheartening to see that lack of understanding for them by the government. Well, you're getting 75%. That should be enough, or you're getting 50% or whatever it might be for the benefit. And and then in the news you see, $20 billion is going to this foreign country. It's like, wait, why? I'm only getting 50% of my benefits. I fought for this country. I'm disabled.
Yep.
And you're sending $20 billion to a foreign country just because maybe they're oil or whatever it might be. And so I'm with you with that outrage. I look at some of even if we just cut like one bomber, or 100 bombs, we could put so much of that money into veterans and making their lives better, rather than feeling they have to fight for everything when they come back. For the most part, I want to come back to what your statement was too, because I have heard, especially in the last couple of years, some other veterans saying, depends on the VA you're going to, but some of them are definitely getting better, and they're finally moving into the modern age of technology as well, which is good to see. But I wish, just back with you, George. I just wish we could. I'm with you with that, being incensed over how much we spend outside these borders, while inside, I feel like there was a movie, David Lynch, where, what was it called? Where everything was green and beautiful and above ground, and below ground it was rotting, it was sinking, it was disgusting. That's how I feel sometimes. We spend all this money outside, and yet inside, like you said, our bridges are collapsing. So many people need healing. So much trauma going on, and people being traumatized every day by lack of resources. And I wish I knew the solution to that one, but I don't.
Yeah. And you know that there's another aspect too. I was talking to my dad last week, and he had brought up, because he was recon, and so he's got some really interesting stories and definitely some interactions with Agent Orange. And he was
Mm,
telling me, George, I just want you to be aware of this. Agent Orange gets into your DNA, and it can have long lasting repercussions, not just for you, but your kids. Like, kids are born with spina bifida because of their great grandfather or their grandfather or their dad being subjected to chemicals like Agent Orange. Like, they're not one generation. Some of these casualties of war last multiple generations, and there's no recourse for that. And I just don't think it's being addressed in a way that should be. And so, shout out to Heroic Hearts and the other veterans groups out there that are really doing their best to raise money to help some of these long-term victims and heal these individuals that came back from a war and didn't get their fair due.
yeah. Yeah, and again, Vietnam, all veterans, yes, deserve healing.
Yes.
The Vietnam vet, some younger vet asked me, well, what about, what about us? What about our generation? I said, well, Heroic Hearts has been focused mainly on you guys, and that's great, and you deserve healing too. But these Vietnam vets, they are literally dying every day, and let's, put some money toward them before it's too late. So
Yeah.
yeah, again, we're not discounting younger veterans at all.
All
We're
of
just
them.
saying this is a time we need to put a little more focus on Vietnam veterans before it's too late.
Yeah, especially with the idea of end of life. We've
Yeah,
spoken a little bit about psychedelics and end of life, and
yeah.
hearts goes out to all the veterans out there. This next question comes from Rachel D., daughter of a Vietnam veteran, Eugene, Oregon. She says, how much of my anxiety,
Mm.
my father's silence, and my family's fractures
Oh.
are secondhand
Mm.
consequences of a war that ended before I was born. Rachel, thank you for that. It's
Oh, wow.
generational.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you for that, Rachel. That was a beautiful share and a powerful share. And whether it's physically passing it on, like you mentioned with Agent Orange, George, or whether it's that emotional trauma that's passed on, it's not woo woo. This is real life. It does get passed down. And especially if you grew up in a household where you feel like you're living on what I call living on eggshells, where
Yeah.
you have to think before you speak, and you have to think about what words might trigger a parent, whether it's a veteran or not a veteran, someone else who's just traumatized. But wow, thank you for that, Rachel. That's wow. Yeah, before you were even born. That's
Yeah.
powerful.
This one comes to us from Noah P., a law student at Madison, Wisconsin. He says, should healing veterans be framed as charity or as reparative justice owed by the state? Someone get Noah a microphone over here.
Yeah. Let's get the lawyers involved.
Right.
Yeah.
I like the sound of that. Reparative justice owed by the state.
Yeah.
It's well said.
Yeah.
Sophia's a clinical researcher from Santa Fe, New Mexico. She says, if guided psychedelic therapy can help veterans reclaim meaning, memory, and dignity, what moral justification exists for delaying its availability?
Oh, good question. I agree 100%. I look at, it's funny, there's a big Ibogaine initiative going on right now,
Yeah, there is.
and it's fascinating, and it will really blow my mind if Ibogaine opens the door to all other psychedelics and plant medicines, and maybe it will, maybe it won't. We'll see how that progresses. But again, yeah, well, oh man, I just wish that we would just, again, with some education, as we've talked about, psychedelics aren't necessarily for everyone, and certainly some
Right.
people with certain medical conditions, both mental and physical. But why isn't this a human right? I mean, these are plants mostly. It's like LSD derived from a plant.
Right.
And so why isn't this, again, I think about like there's a cactus, in your front lawn in Southern California, totally legal to be there. But if you cut it open to get its psychedelic properties, all of a sudden it's illegal. And it's just, yeah, it's so confusing to me because why we made these plants illegal, which of course was totally political. We've talked about that before, and certainly based partly on the uprising from about the Vietnam War and the hippies, quote unquote. But I think plants, these psychedelic plants, should be a basic human right, and that's how it should be framed. And let people choose, not be controlled by the government says, or be so afraid. Like I have someone who won't even do microdosing because they're afraid that if it comes to their house, the government's going to find out and they're going to get arrested, and they have kids, or the whatever they call that, the kid police will come in and take their children away. And no, that's BS. This should not be happening, and should be a basic human right. How we get there, though, maybe we need to get back to that lawyer and have him bring that up. And I know other lawyers, we have some great lawyers in the psychedelic space that are working on this. So hopefully
shout out to Eric Postow, psychedelic lawyer. He's out there listening. Here's a great one that comes in from William Bill C., Vietnam veteran, Fresno, California. William, thanks for being here. He says, do you believe this country is prepared to actually face what it did to us? Woo! I don't know. Bill, I don't know. I think that it's been a long time overdue, and that I don't think so, Bill. If I'm being honest, Bill, I don't think the country is ready for that. Not that the majority of people aren't ready for that. I think that the majority of people are, but the policies in place are not allowing for the actual healing to take place because of what it would mean for foreign policy. And like I said, I'm a glorified truck driver. What do I know? But I do know that the people in positions of authority have a vested interest in a monetary gain of making the war machine continue to grow. That's what grows the economy to so many of these people. And it's, so I would say no, Bill. And I don't say that with any sort of glee or anything, but what's your take on that, Dr. Randall?
I also think I would love to ask, when we were writing this campaign for this fundraising, I had this long history about the Vietnam War in it. And our campaign person was like, that's too long. No one's going to read all that, or they won't donate because it's too long.
Yeah.
But I wonder, speaking of this invisibility, I would love to ask a lot of people 30 and younger, did they even know about the Vietnam War? Because I think not only are the veterans invisible, but I think the war itself became invisible.
Yeah.
And so, they know about Afghanistan and Iraq because they, grew up during that time. But I wonder how much we've just, because of our own government shame or our own, Agent Orange is a whole nother thing, that I think we just wanted to bury the whole thing. And so not only are veterans invisible, but the whole war experience is invisible because it comes back to what you said with protecting these military interests and this and wrapping around the flag. We have to protect our military interests because we're the watchdog of the world. We're the superpower, the only democratic superpower, and all these things where let's just unwrap all this BS that's surrounding this and get to the basic thing that no, war is profitable, as taking your words, George.
It's, as I was thinking about what you're saying and what Bill had mentioned, my wife's father, she's Laotian, and he has a story about Vietnam, living in Laos and having the opposite side come and just take everybody where he was. Hey, you guys are all fighting for us now. So I think it's important to maybe broaden the scope. And while our conversation today is about nonprofits, particularly Heroic Hearts, helping our veterans, it's happening everywhere. The governments and the people in positions of authority. And I don't pretend to know exactly why, but I don't think anybody like no people here have a problem with actual people in another country. Like we didn't do anything to each other. It's just these sort of giant abstract entities telling us we need to go to war to fight these people. But Clint Kiles has a great idea. Clint Kiles says maybe the corporations that benefit from war profits should be responsible for the financial cost of treatment. I believe that there was a no profit on war. There was a bill. It used to be part of our country that in a time of war, you can't charge excessive profits. I don't know if that's still in order. I think it may have been pushed to the side, but Clint Kiles, that's a great, why can't we institute something like that? Why couldn't the politicians say, okay, it's a time of war, Congress declares war, the president he decides we're going over. At that point in time, no company that's making weapons for war can make a profit over 5% or 1%. That could be an economic barrier that would slow down this process and ultimately probably heal a lot of people, and that less people would probably have to go.
Yeah. I'd say any legislation that puts a back end on it, that if we go to war, it's not about just the preparation. We need to have an end game. We need to have, institutions, financing, all these things in place before we declare war. Will that ever happen? Probably not, but it's a great idea. And Quentin, thank you for that. I agree. These corporations that are, you look at how much, like even leaving Afghanistan, how much resources we'd left behind and how many, sadly, people we left behind that probably have perished because of that. And again, just because of this stupid idea that we have to fight each other for some ideology, when that's it, again, with psychedelics, you say, what some of these veterans say is, man, if I had taken psychedelics before I went to war, I never would have gone to war, because these are my brothers and sisters. They're not enemies. They're people like me.
Yep.
And they're going through the same struggles as I'm going through. And it's just a beautiful thing that I wish we had that kind of mindset before we declared war too, that, why are we really doing this?
Yeah, maybe there should be, when you read some of the literature on indigenous communities, I think there's a great book called Black Elk Speaks, and it's a medicine man that talks about a time a long time ago. However, they talk about using plant medicine before they go to war. Like, what would it be like if our politicians had to do a giant dose of MDMA before deciding to go to war? Like, they'd probably be like, wait a minute, hang on, I'm starting to peak a little bit here. This is a bad idea. This is a bad idea. Maybe that should be part of our policy.
Yeah, I mean, I've joked many times that the greatest act would be to put MDMA or psychedelics into the water system for the Capitol and see what happens. The only downside to that plan, though, is for certain people, psychedelics without any kind of preparation, expands their ego. So my fear, they already have such big egos. My fear is putting the psychedelics in the water would make them come out like megalomaniacs. And so, but MDMA is a good choice because that is much more focused on the heart opening and having more truthful conversations. So there's something to be said about that.
Right. And for everybody listening, we're not saying to do that. Don't do that.
No.
Guys talking. It's just a couple guys talking out here. But yeah, it's something to be said about the altered states in which we inhabit that allow us to see the world differently. And you can do it through breath work. You can do it through all these different modalities. But it is these sort of extended awareness that allows you to see through that tunnel vision. And when you get scared, when you're in heightened states of fear, right before you go to war, all these sort of, different states of consciousness that arise on us, they don't allow us to see all of the possible decisions that are out there. And I think that that's another point that this particular project by Heroic Hearts and helping these Vietnam veterans get their life back together is expanding the awareness of how to get better on so many different aspects. Have you talked to some of the people that have come back, Dr. Randall, from these retreats, specifically from Heroic Hearts? And if you have, what are they saying?
It's absolutely amazing. You see them in coaching beforehand, and some of them have just I call it dead eyes.
Yeah.
They're just like glass eyes staring out at you, and there's almost no life behind them. And then you see them after the retreat, after integration, and they're animated. Their their eyes are alive again, and to me, that's the most beautiful thing. I mean, yes, all the other things that happen with that, but just seeing a return of life within them,
Yeah.
rather than this existing that was happening beforehand. So to me, that's that this bare existence before these plant medicines, and then this alive again, and then this idea of this beautiful flower opening up a potential beyond this interruption that war caused in their life, and that war doesn't have to be the end, but just something with lessons if you came back to, or a gift if we look at it the right way and can move beyond it. I mean, certainly for the founder of Heroic Hearts Project, Jesse Gould, this was, he founded this organization after his experience with ayahuasca because he saw the potential and he became alive again. And this is one of the fruits of his flower that he had from plant medicine, and it's beautiful. And like I said, they come back, and you hear these stories of families coming back together. That's
Yeah.
again, spouses saying, "Oh my God, I have my husband or wife back for the first time and
Yep.
since before the war." Um, or children, and I think back to this earlier comment, children saying, I was scared of my dad for a while, or my mom, but usually the dad, and now, we're throwing the football again or whatever. And it's like, it's just so, again, there are so many positives to these experiences, and it's all related to human growth, whether individually or within their families or within their communities. And so I think, yeah, it's, it's just, if we could see if some of these skeptics who could see some of these stories, and more and more, everyone's posting videos or
Yeah.
sharing these stories, and these skeptics can see that, maybe that would change their mind about it, because it's not, you get drunk or you get high on a illegal drug, and you go from lively to existence, or passed out or whatever. And psychedelics are the opposite. You go from passed out in life to alive again through this healing process.
Yeah. Shout out Juliet. Thanks for being here. I
Yeah.
appreciate it. I hope you have a beautiful day.
Okay.
Yeah, it seems to me now I've had I've talked just via text stuff to Jesse, but it seems to me everybody in Heroic Hearts Project is either a veteran or affected by a veteran. Is it veteran run and veteran owned?
Yes. All I believe all the coaches are veterans, and all the top people are veterans, and or are connected to veterans in some way. They also have I should give a little shout out. They have a sister organization called the Hope Project, which is for Gold Star widows who have lost uh, a spouse in battle or in war, and have trauma they need to deal with. And the Hope Project sends these widows to Mexico, I think mostly, for retreats for the same wonderful healing process. So it's a unique and beautiful organization, and it's all about serving these veterans who are, again, often unseen, unheard. How many of us, again, and come back to loving what you did in that dollar store, how many of us see someone, especially an unsheltered person, Vietnam vet, just need a break, or hungry, need a meal? And how many just walk by that?
Yeah.
Even though on Veterans Day we'll say, "Oh, thank you for your service," but we'll walk by that person. And so maybe that's even just the first start. What you
Yeah.
did in that store, just ask them how they're doing, and how And sometimes just hearing them out is the first step to their healing, because wow, someone wants to hear my story, someone wants to
Yeah.
hear some of this that's been trapped in my head. And so I think that maybe that's the first step to doing this, is for us, all of us, to take some kind of action, whether it's on a personal level with someone in the store or on the street, or whether it's through sharing this podcast or sharing the donation link or donating. There are ways we can take action. You can say, well, why should we take action? The government, like we said, oh, the government should do it, or these corporations should do it. But the reality is they're not. And the buck is passed either to no one or to us. And I'm here to say, I'm not wrapping myself in the flag. I'm wrapping myself in healing. And that's what I'm about. And so I will do whatever I can to serve all populations that need healing, but especially veterans, because we so often walk right past them. They are the unseen.
Yeah, it's really well said. It's really well said. Ladies and gentlemen, like I said in the beginning of the podcast, I don't know anybody who hasn't been touched by the life of a Vietnam veteran. And I see it on both sides of my family. And if you can, go down to if you're watching the show right here, there's a link right there. Go down to the website, check it out. If you can make a donation, that's great. If you can maybe just have a kind word for somebody, that's great too. And just the fact that you're here watching and being part of this, well, I'm grateful, and Heroic Hearts is grateful. Dr. Randall's grateful. But let me kick it back to you, Dr. Randall. What do you got coming up? What are you excited about? How can people donate? How can people give? Where is the best place to focus our attention on right now?
Well, you have the link for the Vietnam veteran thing. That's the biggest thing. There's actually, I don't know how many people know this. I didn't know this. You probably know because your dad, but there's actually a Vietnam Veterans Day. It's March 29th. And President Obama started it, and then President Trump actually put it, Congress made it into law, and Trump signed it. So it's wonderful. I think it's an attempt to try to give more light to Vietnam veterans. So our goal is, over the next 3 months, to raise this $35,000 so that we can, honor near that day, hopefully celebrate that we've raised that money, or raised 10 times that amount, so we can get these veterans healing. If you're a Vietnam veteran listening and watching, go to Heroic Hearts, apply for your own healing if that's something you're interested in. As for me, my latest book, probably, I have something deep in my mind, but I'm not ready to share it yet.
Imagine that.
But my latest book, Finding Wellness, I'm still trying to really break the Amazon algorithm on that, because I've priced it as cheaply as possible as an ebook or an audio book, because I want healing to be as accessible to people as possible. Some people can't pay $25 for a book, but they can maybe get $1.49, which is what the Kindle book costs, for Finding Wellness. And it's just a collection of a curated collection of my best articles on healing and on health. And I think, for the most part, as I look around this country, or as I'm in Walmart and I see these shopping carts filled with Cheetos and Coke and other stuff, we need both a health and healing journey. And so that's still my motivation. It is all intertwined, as you said in that beautiful introduction. My goal, I feel it's a mission that came to me in a psychedelic experience, from the collective, from God, from the universe, whatever you want to say it, but just to keep promoting this idea that let's just take one step at a time. You don't have to change overnight, but just start thinking about, how can I heal? Do I need healing from my past trauma? Do I have past trauma? And as I'm looking at my gut expanding, or whatever other health problems, hypertension, maybe I can get on a health journey too. And to me, these, like I said, are intertwined, and that's that path to wholeness, to living our best lives. And so that still is my mission. And people can go to randallshanson.com, my website, and find all my books and find all my articles. You don't even have to buy one of the books. Most of my articles are online. And you just reminded me I need to put a link to the donation page on my website so people can find it a little easier there, or a QR code. So I'll do that too. But that's it. That's my motivation. I feel like once we do plant medicine, we have a greater sense of urgency to serve our fellow humans. And this is my overarching goal. I want everyone to just find some peace in their lives.
It's so beautiful. If you're listening to this, go to randallhanson.com. He's got 4 different books out there, and all of them are chock full of great accounts of people finding ways to become the very best versions of themselves. In our community, Dr. Randall Hansen, I think he got probably the biggest heart out of anybody I know. And I'm so grateful that you and Jenny, you guys are an amazing team. And I'm grateful for all the service that you guys provide to everybody out there. You never quit working, and you're always got something going on. And I'm grateful. And I know the rest of the community is too. So ladies and gentlemen, Heroic Hearts Project, check it out. findingwellnessbook.com. Check it out. randallhanson.com. Check it out. Randall, hang on briefly afterwards. To everybody within the sound of my voice, I hope you have a beautiful day. If you can find it in your heart during this Christmas, help out the Vietnam veterans. Heroic Hearts Project. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. Aloha.